Hey, what's going on, good people? It's your boy James Harris, founder of Mental Heal, author of Man Just Express Himself. Listen, I just want to tell you guys thank you so much for the love that you continue to show me on the movement, the book, and of course now this new YouTube channel. You guys definitely did your thing with liking, sharing, subscribing. Make sure you continue to do that. I definitely appreciate you. I didn't anticipate it to grow as rapidly as it did, but we are here. So, with that being said, I will be introducing a new segment that I'll be interviewing different men throughout the community as well as in different places. And I wanted to do this so you guys can not only just hear my voice and the lessons that I provide for you guys on different knowledge and subject, but I thought it would be an interesting way for other men to tell their story of resilience and their road to their wellness journey. So we're going to be talking in these interviews about mental health, physical health, relationships, substance use recovery, early detection, different societal norms, relationships, athletes and mental health, maybe politics and mental health, and the stressors that's coming from that. And also masculinity. We might dive into that as well. So it's so many amazing men who have reached out that are open to tell their story. So, I'm gonna put something together, man. One Tuesday out of the month. I think it'll be interesting for you guys to hear that dynamic. So be willing and open to listen. I hope you guys continue to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you do that. Make sure you also get the book. Go support. With that being said, the guest that I got coming up is
Yeah. Well, first of all, James, I'd like to, let you know that I appreciate the opportunity to come in on your podcast and share my story. Just tell a little bit about myself. So, my name is Ronnie Nelson Sidney II. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, graduate of VCU, with a master's degree undergrad from ODU. Um, I'm also an entrepreneur, author. These are four of my books in the background. The first one, Nelson Meets the Odds, is a story that sort of follows me from fifth grade into onto graduating college, and it's about a young man who was diagnosed with a learning disability and his challenges and struggles he had in school up until graduating college. So I tell a lot of my story in the book. I followed up with three other books. One is about a young girl who's very intelligent but experienced a lot of childhood trauma and has to overcome that. And then another one is about a young man whose brother is shot and killed by police officers. So with the books, I just created a platform to tell stories, that I can relate to, stories of other kids that I work with, and stories of people I've heard in the news. So I just use writing as a way for me to not only tell stories, but to heal and also process sort of what's going on around me. Um, let's see what else. Right now, I'm currently running for a board of supervisor seat in my hometown of Tappahannock, which I'm sorry, Essex County, and hoping to really bring some changes. For the last year, we've been fighting to remove a Confederate monument that lies in the center of our downtown, and we had organized a march after George Floyd was killed, and just really trying to bring consciousness to the area. I felt like sometimes your voice isn't heard on the outside. Sometimes you just got to get a seat at that table to really be heard and to really make change. So this year I made a decision to run, to be at that table and to be a part of that change.
Man, listen. First, I want to appreciate you for coming on. Your story itself is touching. Not only are you a awesome father, a husband, but you're a social worker. You're within the field. So, what I want to talk about is how oftentimes our clientele, which is my clientele, which is primarily African American, on the boys' side, but I do have couples as well as women as well. But oftentimes they're misdiagnosed, and I know you got experience with that, so we're gonna talk about that. But first I want to dive into this fatherhood thing, man, because you're an awesome father, so I don't want to glance over that. So talk about how you feel fatherhood has impacted your work, your views, your outlooks, pretty much not only from this perspective of being a clinician, but just being active.
Yeah, I mean, I would say really, man, kids is really kind of that engine. Because I can't imagine have accomplished the things I've accomplished being single. But when you have your kids, you really want to make sure that you provide them a life that you didn't have, or just a better life in general. So it sort of pushes you to want to work harder, to do more, to do better. And with my kids, they definitely just inspired me to be accountable, to be present, to be active. I have 3 girls, so it's definitely different with girls and with boys. Because girls, they really hold you accountable. They don't really mix their words well. They, really direct, and they really tell you, how they feel. But I've just been blessed, to be a father, to have the opportunity, to have a great wife, and to be able to build this life. And it's good, man. Right now, one is doing dance, one is doing softball, the other's 3. So, definitely being a parent, you just, like you said, you want to see them happy. You want to see them, involved in stuff. When I was a kid, I really wasn't involved in a lot of sports and other activities. So, seeing them being involved this young, is really good, because hopefully it'll continue to grow and they'll be, great at whatever they choose to do later on.
Yeah, yeah. So is any of them pushing that author route, following in your footsteps, or that as far as entrepreneurship or being an author?
Um, Not so much. Yeah, one she likes TikTok, and she likes acting. She likes that sort of route. The oldest, she's in the softball. The baby, I don't know yet. She's all over the place right now. She likes me to read bedtime stories, so who knows? She may go down that road.
Yeah, yeah. So being a social worker, being a clinician, I know you said, well, I feel that it's our duty and privilege to advocate for people, to be that voice for people. And I noticed you said you was running for a seat. You want to expound on that a little bit? What made you feel that being a social worker, being an advocate, putting yourself in that space, like how do you feel that the people are going to translate to that?
Man, I mean, just being a social worker, you work in so many different systems. In the community, I worked in community mental health for about 10 years locally, and man, you really see sort of what's behind the veils, what's behind the smiles people put on every day, and you really get an understanding of what's really going on in the communities. And a lot of people in the community don't get to see the underbelly. They don't get to see the poverty, the homelessness, the addiction, the trauma. They don't really see that, because it's oftentimes, people feel ashamed, they don't share it. So being able to see it and to know it, I can really speak to it. And a lot of times those clients, you work with and I work with, man, they haven't really developed their voice. They don't, they see things going on, but they don't really know how to speak on it. They don't feel comfortable speaking on it. Or the way that they speak on it is not acceptable to most people. So a lot of time their voices are silent. So I just really hope to bring a different perspective, to really, the people that's marginalized in the communities, African Americans, Latinos, LGBTQI, folks dealing with poverty, folks dealing with abuse and trauma, substance abuse. And I really want to make sure that those voices and those stories are being told, and just really, hope to advocate and support them. But being a social worker, it's a fascinating profession, because again, when I was a social worker, I did in home. I worked in people's homes, doing counseling in their homes. I worked as a counselor with court involved youth, which that was really interesting, because a lot of times the kids are court involved based on stuff that they did at school, whether it's not going to school, whether it's getting in a fight in school, bringing weed to school. It's so many different issues and different things that bring them into the court system. But a lot of times the courts will recommend counseling, and then when you meet with them, in counseling, a lot of other stuff comes out. So you see that this isn't just a lot of times it's not just isolated issues. A kid brings weed to school. Oh, it looks like it's just a everyday thing. But then when you meet with the family, you realize that there's a lot of other stuff going on that's contributing to that. So it might be, parents separated. It could be kids unsupervised. It could be, the kids selling drugs to make money to take care of themselves or their family. It's just so many other things behind the surface of some of the nuances and the things that you see or hear. But I am thankful that this community do have more of a treatment first approach when it comes to juveniles, and also substance abuse. I would like to see it extended to other offenses, but they do have a more treatment centered approach, which I think is good, because a lot of times that substance abuse is really rooted in a lot of other issues within that person's life and community.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think the average population that we serve is dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma and unresolved grief, but it gets diagnosed as other things, which is why I got you on the segment, man, because I know, um, you were diagnosed with something, and pretty much you beat the odds. Author, father, uh, two-time graduate from college, social worker, pillar in your community, just so many different things. So to me, I think they need to see more counselors that look like us, primarily, treating us, because we know um, firsthand what it is. Like, I've sat on so many different FAP team meetings and had to interrupt, with other cultures. Like, nah, this is not the issue. The primary issue is something else. Just
Mm-hmm.
advocating and assisting that mom or that dad with our resources, or what other things can happen besides what they're trying to tell them or diagnose them with or push on them. So if you can, man, just dive into your story about your diagnoses and how you pretty much beat the odds.
Yeah. So I would say about third grade is when my parents said the teacher started, seeing things and, wanting to seek special education services for me. Um, and I would say the primary diagnoses were ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and also dysgraphia, which is something I learned about as an adult, which is a writing disability that is based on handwriting and legibility and the way letter formation. So here I am as an adult learning about these diagnoses. When as a youth I didn't really know what was going on, or what was wrong with me. I think a lot of times with diagnosis, you internalize them. So, even as a social worker, and again, I came up through a good clinic with good clinicians. And, because with kids, there's a lot of sort of negative diagnoses like antisocial personality disorder, um, what is it, oppositional defiant. There's a lot of diagnoses that could be really stigmatizing. And then if a judge or a teacher sees those, it can really sort of paint a kid in a different way. So I like to use adjustment disorder a lot. Adjustment disorder with depression or with anxiety. Post traumatic stress disorder. I think a lot of people don't think that Black kids suffer from post traumatic stress disorder, and I think that comes from just this idea that Black people are like so resilient, and even if they receive the trauma, that they can overcome it, and it shouldn't impact them in any way, which I think is completely false. Um, so a lot of times, you see, especially with boys, you see the diagnosis being more stigmatizing. But once I learned that I was diagnosed with learning disabled, which again I didn't learn until I was in college, and the only reason I learned is because I had wrote a paper on the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and I wanted to go back and research, myself and how I ended up in special education. I had asked for all those documents, and I was just sifting through the documents and reading, and was just kind of shocked how I was being painted and how I was perceived at that time. So it was definitely kind of like a cold hard reality, seeing that and knowing that even though I was diagnosed with that, I never accepted it. Like I never accepted having to learn this, but I never accepted those labels. And really, it was more of a not so much the labels, but it's sort of the track that they put you on once you get those diagnoses, or if you're a student who they feel like it's not going to college, they kind of put you on this track where you're taking classes that aren't challenging. You're taking classes with a lot of kids with behavioral issues, discipline issues. And, it's an environment where it's not really conducive for learning. It's almost like they talk about the school to prison pipeline. It's almost like a jail, like you're like a juvenile detention program. And the teacher, her job is discipline. It's not really so much to educate. It's more so how we gonna keep these kids behaving for 45 minutes. So, I knew there was a different side because I could see it. I could see it, and I wanted to be on that side because I wanted to be, successful. I wanted to go to college. I had friends who were interested in that. But once you get put on that track, man, it's so hard to get off. I had to actually go to my parents, and they had to get me out of special education in high school because they wanted to put me in the resource room all day, which they call it's a part of special education where they keep you in a room all day. I forgot the exact name of it, but it was something I really wasn't interested in doing. I didn't want to be in special education to begin with. Better yet, being there, all day. And I think a lot of kids who end up in those situations, when I was in school, mostly African American kids, African American males who sometimes had behavior issues and they could have been dealing with trauma. Because when you're young, you don't really know what trauma is. You just know how certain people act. Oh, he crazy. Oh, he this, he that. But you don't know the trauma. Like you don't know about sexual abuse because it wasn't something I experienced. So I didn't really know. Oh, this kid might be sexually abused or stuff happen. Like you see older guys dating younger girls. You didn't really think that, oh, that could be, rape or sexual assault because everything was normalized. But now as an adult, kind of looking back at that age and that era, you look at it through a different lens. And I think that's what social workers bring to the table, especially, I'm glad that you got into the field, but Black social workers, our lens is totally different than some of our colleagues who may not have been exposed to certain things or may not necessarily agree or believe in, some of the cultural issues that we have. Some people judge various things and they have these, so that somebody have these stigmatizations or stereotypes. But I would say with social workers and counselors, they're more conscious of it. But sometimes being conscious isn't enough. Being conscious of your biases, and even now as a Black social worker, I realize I have some biases too. So, there's any Black social workers working out or watching this video, don't think just because you're Black or you're Hispanic, you're a social worker that you don't have biases because we all have them. This is some of them are a lot more evident than others.
Yeah. So it's up to us to ensure that we're checking those biases and not, pushing them on our clientele that we're serving. That's the main thing.
Absolutely.
So do you think you would have had those diagnoses if, I guess, the people who gave you the label was more culturally competent, or if they was from the culture? Do you think that had an effect on you receiving those diagnoses, being placed in special ed, and having those labels?
Oh, absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with it. Because I looked at the test scores and the test scores, because they give you these tests before they put you in special education, like these sort of like these academic type of tests. And the test scores are really like grade level. Like I was scoring grade level, sometimes a little bit above. So the test scores really weren't that bad. So the one thing about special education, you kind of have the test score. So you have this objective side, but then you also have the opinionated subjective side. I think a lot of times with Black kids, that subjectivity sometimes has more influence than the objectivity. And, that's how a lot of times, they get Black kids pushed into the system is because it gives them that subjective lens to look through. And I'm not saying I was a most well behaved student because I wasn't. I think behavior has a lot to do with it. I tell teachers, I say oftentimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It was some kids in school who struggled more academically, but they were well behaved, well adjusted. So those kids sometimes didn't get diagnosed because they're well behaved, they're good students. So the teachers really don't pay attention to it. But when you're like the loud student, the student that this wanting attention, is more outspoken, those students sometimes create those conflicts, or teachers don't want them in the classroom. Special education sometimes is a way to kind of get to marginalize those kids to get them pushed out of the way. And I see it a lot too with behaviors. And I will tell this to parents, and even counselors. Special education services today are much different, I think, than they were back then. I think there is now more a conscious acknowledgement that Black kids are overrepresented in special education. But there's a push actually within like the white community where they're fighting to get those kids diagnoses, because having a special education diagnosis, it makes you a minority group. You're a student with disabilities, and with that, there comes some advantages, whether it's scholarships, whether it's extra test time, and those IEPs and 501(k) plans. They actually you can take them to college, so you can actually get additional services in college. But I think because we've been so stigmatized with that, a lot of times Black parents aren't willing to accept those services. But the one thing about being in special education too is that if you have behavioral issues, they can't just kick you out of school and not offer you services. So if you're in special education or receiving special education services, they have to offer you some type of education. If and they also have to have a meeting too. So let's say you got a number of suspensions, they have to determine, is this suspension because of a disability or is it because of a behavioral issue? I think it's called a manifestation meeting. And then after that, if they say the school isn't able to handle you, then they have to send you to a school where you can receive a quality education and special education services. But if you have a kid who doesn't have an IEP, they can just kick him out of school. They don't have to necessarily offer him any type of service. And sometimes they'll give them like this correspondence kind of class where they'll go to the library or some type of center for 2 hours, 4 hours a week, and it's not really education. It's just something. But, sometimes the IEP can actually give you benefits. But again, you have to really educate yourself. Virginia has this great program called I'm Determined, which is a wonderful resource. And it kind of normalizes students with disabilities because disabilities can be so many different things, such as, being blind, being deaf. It could be having a physical disability. It could be having a speech issue. I mean, it's so broad. But having an IEP, again, it can be a tool for parents because with the IEP, an individualized education plan, it's a plan to help your kids succeed. So it's you, the teacher, your child working out a plan that can help this kid succeed in school. And by law, the school has to honor that plan. And you can actually take the schools to court if they don't fulfill it. So, it's definitely a tool that parents, and advocates, and I would encourage parents, if you are a parent who is struggling with the process, struggling with understanding, seek out an advocate because there's a lot of special education advocates, people who are parents or lawyers that can really help you navigate the system because it is intimidating, it is scary. Just like you talk about the FAP teams, which is kind of like a local group of individuals who meet to decide whether or not they're going to fund a certain service. It can be intimidating being the only person at that table. So I know, like you, it seems like you've been to some. Well, sometimes they'll ask the counselor to come because it's very, it's really intimidating being a parent, especially if you don't really have the education and your child is misbehaving and you feel like they're looking down on you. But having someone come to those meetings who can speak in your best interest, who can articulate and understand what's being said and being able to share that with you, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And that, to be honest with you, that part of the advocacy is what I enjoy, like going to FAP meetings with my clients, going to IEP meetings with my clients, because the population, you got to understand, most of the times within those demographics are lower SES, which means that parent is probably coming off her second job or his second job, got a rush to the school meeting. So a lot of the times the administrators be talking over their head, with these big terms and labels, and they don't understand the paperwork. So I feel for us, it's easier for us to break it down and educate them within the process and let them know their options or what's available. So I definitely agree with that. But I think it was different when, you said you was in the third grade and they presented it then because, back then it could have been solely based on funding, like certain funds were entitled if you have a certain amount of special education children or a certain amount of funding if somebody has a diagnosis and stuff like that. Now, today, I think it's way more scrutinized. Like you said, with the IEPs, like you have to have it, and they have to monitor it, and they have to do, the follow-up meetings. They have, like, it's benchmarks now, opposed to just saying, hey, they're special ed, So now I definitely think it's way different than somebody saying, hey, let's label them. So, which is a good thing. It's evolving, and that's primarily based on advocacy, based on people like you, being loud with it, putting out material, giving resources. Like those things are definitely important, because if not, it'll be a lot of more people just thrown away or labeled, not knowing that they have a position to change it. So I'm happy that you was able to have your parents like, yo, get me out of here. I'm better than this. I can perform. I can do what I need to do. And like you said, to be honest with you, I found that most of the behavior issues were easier for a teacher to disregard the student and get them out of class so they can go, because most of the time the class is overcrowded, kids doing what they want to do, so it's easier for me to get you out of here and teach the rest of the people opposed to battling you, trying to teach and all that. So that's a whole different story. But I don't want to keep you, man, so let's dive into these books. Nelson Beats the Odds, that was your first one. Awesome piece of literature. I got a couple copies. I gave a couple copies to some clients, refer some parents and things like that. So let's dive into those, man.
Yeah, man, and much respect to you, brother. I cracked open your book, man, and I love the way it's presented. As a workbook, that really help, get those skills out. But the first book, and I decided to do graphic novels because when I was in school, man, I wasn't a reader. Like, I didn't like to read. It wasn't I couldn't read. It's just the fact that, it's just I didn't like the books with a lot of pages because it looked intimidating. It looked like it'll take me a whole year to read this book. So I really wasn't much into reading books without pictures. But I did like comics. So I decided to do the graphic novel format because I wanted the book to be a quick pickup book. So my books are like less than 36 pages, and it's a lot of graphics in there. And with graphic novels, it's actually a good tool for kids who, struggle reading, or kids who may have a disability, because they can use the graphics to kind of make sense of some of the text. So with the book, I wanted to write a book. I want to write the book that I wish I would have had growing up. Like, I really wish there was a book or a movie about a kid who kind of reminded me of myself, because, when you are going through that, you really go through it alone. You got your parents, but I never really talked to my parents about how I interpreted it. I think, and that's sometimes too is a fault with young men, is that sometimes we hold our emotions. We don't really talk about vulnerabilities. So I really wanted to, and I know sometimes in order to teach that is you have to speak it. Like, you have to be vulnerable and share your story in order to be a testimony to someone else who's going through what they're going through. So I really wanted to just write a book, for those kids who struggle, but I really wanted to have like an optimistic, positive type of vibe. So, on the cover, you see Nelson in the Superman pose, because I wanted to let kids know that regardless of whatever challenge you have, academic, behavioral, that you can overcome them, and we always talk about working hard, but it's sometimes it just takes to have advocates in your corner. It take having a group of friends who motivating you, not people who going to tear you down or pull you down, having teachers who going to advocate and build you up. It takes a lot of different things, to work in your favor to overcome those odds. So, I kind of write for everybody, like the teacher, the parent, the students, the friends, so everybody can know that they all have a role in, building a child up. In my second book, I wanted to write about Nelson's friend, Tamika, who's actually a really bright student, but she's dealing with abusive parents on drugs. She gets separated from her parents, have to go live with her grandmother, with her siblings. She goes to a new school, has to deal with colorism. She has to learn how to deal with conflict in a different way, than what she's accustomed to. Because what I find is a lot of times our youth is not that they don't necessarily have the tools to deal with conflict. It's a lot of times that, emotional regulation is not something that schools teach. That sometimes in different homes, depending on what community you're from, you don't really learn how to regulate your emotions in healthy ways. So I wanted to kind of teach that in the book. Like, you could deal with conflict without always fighting or name calling and doing various things. A lot of times people is making fun of you. Those are people who are envious of you. And sometimes instead of you fighting fire with fire, sometimes you got to be the bigger person, find out what's really going on, and then seek to find some way to rectify the situation. So this is a story that I love because it's really a story of a trauma, and a young girl who's just dealing with it in so many different ways. But her grandmother sold her this African style dress, because for me, having that cultural understanding, like really knowing and understanding your history as African American beyond slavery, is something that really empowered me So throughout my books, you'll see different themes. Like you'll see the pharaohs, you'll see me refer to different things, because I think having a really good grasp of history, again, beyond what's taught in school, it can really be a tool for empowering a person. Then rest in peace, Rashawn was a story that I wrote after Tamir Rice was killed. It took me about 2 or 3 years to actually publish the book, because I was constantly getting new information and different things happening. So many different other killings happened after that, that I really felt like it was time to really put a book out that spoke to it. So it's a book about a young man whose brother is shot and killed by a police officer because he gets this toy gun that he thinks is going to protect him from these neighborhood bullies. I really wanted to tell a story beyond the story, because oftentimes when you see these shootings, you kind of just see the shooting. Like, you don't see what led up to the shooting, the human part of it, what happened, this, that, and the third. So I really wanted to share a story that was sort of multi-layered. You got a kid living in the community where there's gangs there. He feels unsafe, and he thinks that getting the gun is going to keep him safe, when it actually causes more danger. So I really wanted to, when I talk to the story, I talk to boys about, hey, I grew up in the country. I could have a BB gun because nobody lived in my neighborhood. And guns in the country, you see people riding around with guns on their on their trucks. Like, this gun, the culture is different here. But if I was in East End and I'm out there with a gun that looks like a real gun, that could lead to a different situation. And I tell them that, especially if you black with a gun, sometimes you got to speak to the elephant in the room. And oftentimes the elephant in the room is that, when you black, you got to carry things differently. It's not right, but it's real. And I think, telling those stories and having kids talk about gangs in their community, because a lot of times, it's more serious than a lot of times parents think, and it's scary. And that's why I like the character in the book, Jeremy, who's the one who gets the gun, because a lot of times with our boys, they don't always think rationally. Like, I hate the adults, the kids, 12 or 13-year-olds are rational people. Like, they think like adults. Like, no, they're emotional, they're impulsive. They don't think in the future. I don't think sometimes our boys really get that luxury. So, with the story, it's just a cautionary tale of really, what it's like being a black male living in a community where they having to deal with violence. And I feel like it's a story that really, sort of gives a platform for people to talk about those things.
Man, touching. Like, it's so timeless. Like, all of your literature is so timeless. Because like we already know, it's gonna be somebody, primarily probably African American male, is going to be misdiagnosed this upcoming school year, or placed in special education this upcoming school year. So that book, Nelson Beats the Odds, can be a good tool for parents and those young ones. Tamika's New Dress is definitely a phenomenal piece that people can associate with. And rest in peace, Rashawn. Like, since you've written that book, it's been so many more countless timeless deaths, just at the hands of officers. So again, that's going to be another timeless piece, man. So where can people find this information?
Yeah, Amazon, man. Amazon has, all of the books. Thank God for Amazon. If you're a self-published author, the Amazon is like, it's like it, man. Like, Amazon gives you that platform and opportunity to really get your work out there. Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. If you're a self-published author or interested in becoming an author, definitely check out those services. I get them from Amazon. They'll get there to you fast. It's a good resource.
Yeah. So, how can people find you? How can they get in contact with you? Speaking engagements, I know you do those too. They might want you to come to a school, and I also know that you do the bundles, because it was at this community function where I actually bought the bundle of all the books, in addition to some other stuff that you were selling. So, where can people find you as far
Oh
as
yeah,
social
definitely.
media?
So you can
Yeah.
go to my website. You can go to my website, nelsonbeatstheodds.com. Email address is Ronnie at creative-medicine.com, or RONNIESIDNEY at yahoo.com. And you can just hit me up. I speak at schools, I do conferences, I do teachers. trainings. I do assemblies. I do small groups. I do a lot of stuff. Consultations. You can get the books autographed if you reach out to me privately. I can get those for you. But yeah, I'm definitely open. I love schools. I love speaking at schools. I love interacting with kids. I love sharing my story. I love encouraging kids. I really feel like, when I go to school, it's really not even about me. It's really about encouraging this next generation, especially coming off COVID, and kids missing like a year and a half of academics. It's going to be challenging. A lot of kids, it's going to be challenging for teachers, challenging for parents, and challenging for teachers. So, you might need that extra boost, that extra motivation. I'm definitely available to speak.
Man, hey, listen, between me and you, I'm putting it out there now. You're gonna definitely write a book, an education tool for. It's probably gonna be Tamika going back to school post COVID or something like that. That can definitely work, man. I already see it. I'm gonna put that out there for you. We can touch and agree. So,
absolutely,
my fellow Black father, my fellow clinician, I definitely appreciate having you, man. Very insightful. It's so much more I could have dived into, but I want the people to get in contact with you to get the additional information. So I definitely appreciate you. We're gonna chop it up. Thanks for your time, man. Thanks for your insight. And I'm definitely gonna blast this. I'll let you know when it comes out and everything.
Appreciate you, bro. And also, I got the Kevin Gates shirt on, man. Big shout out to Kevin Gates, man, for sharing his trauma and really talking about how he uses music as a way to heal, man. I always felt like that for writing. Like writing has been my tool to heal. My business is called Creative Medicine, Healing Through Words. We can heal through words. Therapy is great too. Therapy is a great tool. But if you don't feel comfortable with your therapist or you can't afford a therapist, put your words on those pads. Put your words on paper, art, dance. There's a lot of different ways to approach trauma, to deal with trauma, to cope with trauma. But it's definitely a healing season, man. 2021 is healing. I know, this brother right here, James, is all about healing. So we're gonna keep the energy growing, man, for 2021, 2022, and beyond.
Yeah, no, we definitely got to continue to do that. And like you said, those things are definitely therapeutic outlets. The music, the dance, all of that creativity, tapping into the other side of your brain is definitely beneficial. So again, man, definitely appreciate you coming on. Continue to be loud and continue your journey, especially getting that seat out there, man. I already know that's your victory. The people need you, and I'm sure you're gonna do the town so much justice, just being an advocate, having your voice and your leadership.
Appreciate you, bro. And good luck with everything you're doing, man. Thanks for the opportunity to join the platform, and I wish you much success.
Nah, man, likewise. Appreciate you, bro.
All right, peace.